We are going to show today an example of building a plugin. This session will basically talk both about ITXML plugins, include plugins, HTML plugins, and PCScript plugins. The example we're going to work with today specifically looks at an ITXML or include plugin, but the concepts apply to any of the plugins that you might want to write. The example we're looking at right now in this dashboard is the scale marker plugin example. Essentially what we're going to try and do, this is what we will be building in the tutorial. We have a data funnel, and I'm going to go select that. The data funnel has three different columns of data. It's year-to-date revenue, and I've got a value for the year-to-date revenue. I also have a target and last year-to-date. And I want to be able to graph all three of these values in a bar chart or almost a bullet type graph, which is what you're seeing here that we're displaying. I want the data for those three different fields to be displayed in this graph. Currently, using Corda's CenterView product, there is no way to use the scale markers, which is what we're using here to represent the different values, other than using a plugin. So this is the final state of where we're going to end up. We're showing the current value of the year-to-date revenue. We're also showing last year's year-to-date using a range scale marker. And then the final value we're showing here is our target value. And we're showing that using a line, which is also a scale marker. So the process of this tutorial will go through creating this plugin. And by the time you're done, hopefully you can go through that process and create any plugins that you might want to do similar type of things. So I'm going to start with creating this without the plugin from scratch. And I have a separate project that I'm going to go in to do that. These projects should all be available for you to pull down and look at how this was done. So I've got scale marker plugin step 1. Now in this case the values are slightly different here. What I have, if we open up the project, I have a graph and I have that same data funnel attached to it with the values. In this case, the way we recommend that you would write a plugin is first to determine how you would do it without using a plugin, and then write a plugin to provide that data that you would get in another way. So in this case what I've done is I have the graph and I have this ITXML tag, and I'm going to go out first off and just disable that so you can see what the chart looks like if we didn't have that in it. So by default I've got my data funnel attached to the graph, and it only graphs one value, which is the first value that we saw, the year-to-date revenue. And I want to essentially extend the functionality of this graph. The way I've done that is using this ITXML tag, and we'll go look at the source for that and explain how I got to that. So this is a piece of ITXML that we're looking at, and essentially all of the Corda images are written in ITXML, and this is a snippet of that ITXML that I could take directly from the Corda image, and we'll discuss how you would do that next. So let's go ahead and close this, and I'm going to delete it and we'll recreate that piece of ITXML. Okay, so to see the ITXML for this graph, I will select the graph. Now that the graph is selected, I will actually go over to editing the graph. As we look at the graph, there are no scale markers in it, and I want to find out what the source would look like if I had a scale marker. So I'm going to create a couple scale markers that will essentially emulate what I want to have in the finished product. So I select the graph, and I'll go up to the scale marker, and I'm going to create two of them. By default, you can see that the scale marker that was created is a line. I'm going to click on this again and create another one. Down below here I can see that there are two scale markers created, 1 and 2, and they're overlapping each other. They're both lines. So I'm going to edit a few of those properties first. The first scale marker I am going to make a range instead of a line. I'm going to change the color on this so that it's that gray background color. So I'll go to the hex and just type in a gray color. And I also want to add a title to this scale marker. And this range I'm going to call last year to date. The last thing I want to do on this is the default value for the scale marker is 50. If I leave it as 50 when I look at the source, it will not appear in the source because it's the default value. So I'm going to change that value to something else so I can see where that value is displayed. Okay, the second scale marker I'm also going to modify to be closer to what I want. So I open that up. It's a red line, which is okay. The width of the line, maybe I want to change that to be a little bit thicker. Again, I want to change that default position to something so that it will end up in the ITXML file. And lastly, I'm going to give it a label. And this one we will call target. The other change that I need to make to these is to tell the label that we want to show it all of the time. And in this case it shows it by default above, which is what I want. And I'll do the same thing with the other one. So we'll show the range always. And currently they're overlapping, but we'll be changing that in a minute.